You're listening to the Common Descent Podcast. And welcome to Spookulative Evolution.
Hello, Aly.
Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Note to the editor, please insert an audio clip of the sound that Triffids make. Will.
We'll discuss that. We'll discuss the sound they make a little bit later. Okay. You can retroactively.
Excellent. I'll do an impression.
And hello, listeners. Welcome to the final episode, episode 4 of Spook-E, Spookulative Evolution for 2021.
One more time. One more time around the thing.
With feeling.
Yes, with gusto. We will be describing Triffids today, discussing them.
And then evolving them.
Ooh.
So we'll go into what those are in just a moment. But first, for anyone who's new to this show, this is our show where we discuss classic monsters in movie and myth and legend and go over what they are and then how we could achieve those or similar features for a very reminiscent creature in the real world under our knowledge of evolution and natural selection to try to get a naturally evolved monster. This year we've been discussing monster plants, which is why it's not just me and David. We also have Aly with us.
That's why I'm here. I'm the plant friend.
And we're thrilled.
Yeah.
And today's plant is Triffids. Now, Triffids may be recognizable to some, and less so to others. It is one of the more famous plant monsters when it comes to culture and media, but I didn't know about them until the first time I had someone say we should talk about them, and then I learned all about them. Triffids are the titular monster for a story, a novel, published in 1951 called Day of the Triffids. They are stalk-like, tall plant creatures that walk around and have a deadly sting. We will go into more detail of their features, but the history of these monsters start in that novel by John Wyndham. The general plot is that in this world, in this version of Earth, there are these plants, Triffids. No one knows where they come from for sure, but they are predatory plants that produce an oil that is incredibly useful for industrial purposes.
Huh.
So
they're like whales.
Yeah, it's one of those. This is like if tigers produced whale oil.
Yeah.
So the cultivation of Triffids becomes a global business practice. You can prune them to make them safe to be around. So they actually start becoming common in greenhouses and gardens as well. But the farmed ones aren't pruned because they produce better oil if they're still dangerous. The main plot beat that happens in the story is that our main character, Bill Mason, is in the hospital because he got some Triffid venom on his eyes and was temporarily blind, or he was slashed across the eyes. I don't remember which one it was for sure. And is in the hospital with gauze covering his eyes. Well, while he's in the hospital, a strange meteor shower comes into our atmosphere that gives off an unusual green light. And everyone who views said meteor shower is blinded. And so globally, a huge portion of the population is suddenly permanently blind. Bill wakes up to a world where he is one of the few remaining sighted individuals due to his gauze and injury. And now the rest of the story takes place in a post-apocalyptic England where he is trying to survive among raiders and despots who are trying to rise to power, whilst Triffids have now become loose. Without anyone to care for them and to corral them, they have started to break out and escape, the facilities where they were cultivated, and those that were harmless start to regrow. And now there are predatory plants roaming around a population of blind people. This story has been readapted many times. The first novel was in 1951. There was a feature film by the same name in 1962. Multiple radio dramas from 1950s all the way up to 2001. 2 different TV series in 1981 and 2009. And this was the inspiration for the movie 28 Days Later.
It's funny. You were talking about the setup, and I was thinking 28 Days Later. Which, for anyone who is unfamiliar, 28 Days Later is about a guy who's in a coma or some sort of medical thing, and then he wakes up to find that the world has been attacked by zombies.
Yes. The original novel was also inspired by H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds.
Oh, okay.
Which is also about people surviving in a post-apocalyptic event.
Right.
More about how humanity reacts to these situations than the actual cause of the apocalypse.
Right. Which is also the case in 28 Days Later, and indeed most zombie movies.
Yep. Also, a fun note I found, the original working title for War of the Worlds was The Day of the Tripods.
Oh! That's so good.
That's pretty cool.
Isn't that awesome?
Oh, that's very good.
Nice.
Well done, Wyndham.
See what you did there.
Now, the stories that go into the variety of retellings are slightly different, as are Triffids themselves. So let's go over what Triffids are. Triffids, named for the 3 legs they have. I read from one source that the original pronunciation was going to be Triffids. And so, tri-footed.
Yep.
This is because these plants have 3 pseudo-root-like structures at the base that act as legs and feet.
Right. They have sort of a bulbous
Yeah.
body with foot-like lobes, which make me think of both P.D. Piranha and Alolan Executor.
Yes. Yep.
For the Nintendo fans.
Now, for the origins of these creatures, it is never explained in the novel. A few characters speculate. Bill Mason, the main character, suspects that they are of USSR origin and were biological weapons that then escaped.
Right, made by the Russians.
Yep, because of when this was written.
Yep.
Others, like the 62 film, portrays that they are flat-out aliens.
Yep.
Obviously.
Not an uncommon decision for Monster Plant origins.
In the first TV series, they were definitely Soviet. I think they even named the biologist who made them, and then they get released when they are being smuggled by plane and dispersed.
Okay.
And then in 2009, they are naturally occurring. They are just a species of plant that then were selectively bred for their oils.
For an audience that isn't going to buy just the uber convenient concept that they're aliens, but also doesn't just by default hate Russia.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Now, as for where they lived, they are said to be temperate to tropical, but they definitely grow faster and bigger in the tropics.
Checks out.
And so they are found worldwide other than the poles.
Also checks out.
Yep. The characteristics, what a Triffid is physically, is typically divided into 3 sections: the base, the trunk, and the head. The base is that bulbous section that has 3 root-like feet. The trunk is a tall, sometimes described as rigid, sometimes more flexible stem portion that comes up. And then the head is a funnel or flower-shaped structure where the stinger is held. Typically, they would stand about 7 foot tall, so just a little bit more than 2 meters, with some being described, like especially tropical ones were described as getting up to like 10 foot, 3 meters.
Oh.
And in a couple of the other stories, there are even bigger ones. In the sequel novel that was written later by a different author, they described some in North America that were 60 foot tall.
Wow.
18 meters. But that's non-canon, that's a secondary.
I'm not talking about that. We're purists.
So let's work our way from the bottom up. The base, 3 blunt root-like structures that act as feet and legs. When the plant is dormant, it will use these as temporary or pseudo-roots to take nutrients from the ground. When it is active, it uses these to walk around. The walking is described as like that of a man with a crutch, in that it will move 2 of the feet forward, and then they specifically lurch to drag the back one up with it, and then slide the front 2 forward again. All the while the stem waving with each motion. Violently, sometimes it was described.
That's such an effective visual.
Right?
Yeah. Cool.
And it's said that they can achieve a speed of about average human walking speed. So it couldn't chase you down, but it could stroll with you.
But
Right,
if you don't
like a
know they're
zombie.
coming...
Yeah.
Or if they trap you in the mall.
I understood that reference.
The legs are also said to be covered by shaggy root-like hairs,
Okay.
like aerial roots.
Mm-hmm.
Above that, we get to the stalk, the stem, and where those two meet, just above the bulb, there are sticks, leafless sticks called clatter sticks that point straight up along the stem body. And the Triffids will drum on themselves with these clatter sticks
Oh.
to make a rapping sound, just like a drumming sound. They never explain definitely what this is for. Everyone in the book are a little confused by it. It's proposed that it could be part of their reproductive system. Others believe it might be to communicate. There is even one suggestion that it might be a form of echolocation. It is stated, though, that if you remove those sticks, the Triffid starts to die. It will start to deteriorate physically. So this is a key part of the Triffid. It needs its clatter sticks.
Huh.
So you should have gotten some drumsticks.
Well, it's funny for the sound thing. I did actually look up clips from, I think it ended up being the miniseries, and I heard the noises they made, and I went, no, I'm going to make a joke instead.
Yeah.
The clip that I found, it sounded like the Predator.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's supposed to be the clatter
sort of-
sticks. That's the clatter sticks rumbling on them.
It's funny, right? Because like you're telling me about how this thing walks, and my brain was like, yes, that's fine. And then you start telling me about the clatter sticks, and my brain goes, I don't buy that.
That's ridiculous.
Right? Like, don't know why that was the line.
Its Triffids are nature's drumline.
Yes, yes.
The stem section is basically just a stalk. It's, there's nothing particular about it. Sometimes it's described as having leaves. Sometimes there's leaves around the base, but it's just a stalk, somewhat flexible typically, and usually moving, like saying, waving while it walks. The top of that, though, is the head, which is a funnel-like structure, sometimes leaf-like in some of the readaptations. And inside it, even though it's never described, the original art shows 3 stamen coming out, so reproductive structures like in a flower. But the main feature is in there is a wound up cord, which was described as looking like a rolled up fern frond.
Okay.
And the inside of the funnel has sticky goo, sticky resin, or sap of some sort that traps insects. So it's supposed to be kind of a picture plant-esque thing going on, but it's sticky instead of drowning. The rolled up frond, though, is the stinger, and this is what makes it a monster. This thing, when unfurled, was described to be up to 10 feet long, so 3 meters long, a tentacle-like tendril, which at the end has a stinger to it.
So it like lashes out.
Yep.
Like a shear shoe.
Yes. It's like a poisonous whip, toxic whip.
Thorn whip.
That was also described as being sticky sometimes, so it may have also been able to catch things with the stickiness.
Oh, that's cool. Like a frog.
Yeah, right? It will use this stinger to lash at prey items, animals, typically aiming for their head or face. And when stung, the venom is powerful enough to kill a full-grown human. And once they've killed their prey, they will just sidle over to the body, take root, and let it decompose. And feed off of the rotting corpse.
Yeah.
I am so into this.
Right?
Making your own fertilizer.
Uh-huh.
Now, the head is the key to making them benign. If you remove that funnel, they become harmless. And it doesn't kill the plant. So you can have pruned Triffids and be perfectly safe as long as you prune them annually, because in 2 years they will regrow the stinger.
Mm-hmm.
I did find one description on the Triffid info website. So I don't know where this is from. They didn't give which of the versions this description comes from.
This is the website that the Triffids created.
Right? This is their counterintelligence that described them as eating by using the stinger to pluck pieces of flesh off and place it into the funnel, compared to the trunk of an elephant picking up food. Which, yeah, I agree with your expression, Aly. That's a bit
That was a bit too far.
sillier than the taking root. And the taking root is the original and the version I saw most commonly.
Yeah. See, the difference was when you said taking root, I lit up and got real excited. You say pick pieces off like an elephant, and I'm just like, not into that.
No. Reproduction. It is described that there are dark green pods under the funnel that when it's time for them to reproduce will swell and burst with air dispersing seeds.
Okay.
I don't know where this, like, why this is significant, but it was listed multiple times that 95% of them are infertile. Like, most don't get fertilized or just don't make it, I guess, but it's not going to spread a field of Triffids is what it sounds like.
That does make sense, right? Like, plants are like, here are all my babies, hopefully someone makes it. The thing that I'm real hung up on, though, is you skipped a step in reproduction.
No,
seeds!
When it's time for them to make seeds, they make seeds.
Right.
I don't see...
But, like... I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I desperately want to know how this is pollinated, given that they put murder slime in the place where you need to be pollinated.
I can only assume that the lash scrapes pollen off the inside of one flower and then whips out into the funnel of another one.
Well, no, they're like slugs where they have to fence first to figure out who's going to be the male and who's going to be the female with the stingers.
Yeah,
and then they pollinate one another.
Or the tongues, the stingers come out and like wrap around each other.
Oh, like the banana slugs,
like the banana slugs, or like snakes. Or like the Navi.
Yes, no, that's it.
Yeah, and then they're exchanging reproductive material.
Yeah, I'm down with this. Okay, cool. Thank you for clarifying.
Canon.
In truth, I found not a single mention of that. Nothing. At no point does anyone in any of the versions that people wrote over and over again over the last 50 years did anyone think to describe their pollination.
I am fundamentally upset about that.
Right?
Listen, now's our chance.
This
is it.
I am all over this.
Definitive Triffid reproduction.
Canon. It's canon.
Now, another topic that comes up in the stories a lot of time is the vagueness of Triffid intelligence, to where a lot of the characters will comment on there's no nervous system, there's no sign of a brain, and yet their behavior sure does seem purposeful. They aim for faces, but also when people are stung, it's almost always at exposed skin, hand and arms, avoiding coverings. They talk about the fact that they seem to be aware of their surroundings. In the original story, there are tellings of them cornering the blinded into places where they're easier to catch, chasing them into a place where they now won't be able to escape. Also, that they will take root outside of houses and buildings next to the door to try to catch people as they leave.
Cool.
Things like that.
I am Team Triffid, like...
Right? It's fantastic. And that they obviously can sense they can respond to sound. And there's the idea that the Clatter Sticks are either to communicate with one another or to sense their environment. But it's never explained exactly how aware a Triffid is. They also do mention some of the things that deter a Triffid. Guns don't work.
Okay.
Unsurprisingly.
Like Audrey 2.
Yes.
Fire does.
Makes sense.
Also unsurprising.
Right? Fitting. And it was described that electric fences will deter them, but not kill them.
Unlike Audrey 2.
Yes. Now, they do have some varieties that show up in the other adaptations. In the 62 version, they also had extra slashing vines in the lower section of the plant that could be used as an offensive weapon and to drag bodies to themselves. They also interpreted the stinger as a gas-propelled toxin, as a puff of toxin instead of a stinging vine, probably due to movie special effects of the time. Mm-hmm. It's much easier to show that with practical effects. In the 2009 TV series, they also had these constricting roots which could grab victims and people, but also that they would use to move themselves a lot of the time. They, I believe, also interpreted the head as much more flower-like instead of just a funnel, instead of pitcher plant-like. And this, as well as the original novel, showed the stinger as being strong enough to, punch through a window. Very powerful lashing attacks, while a lot of the other films and interpretations made them a bit more weak and not nearly as violent.
being able to punch through a window is pretty standard monster requirement,
Yes.
Right?
for modern movies.
If you can't get me through a window, then why am I scared of you?
Right. What's even if you can't get me through this sugar glass?
If the stuntman can do it and you can't. And then one last interesting thing I found is, once again, in the sequel, Night of the Triffids, it was mentioned that some people have built up immunities by either being lightly exposed to the toxin or ingesting parts of the plants while having to eat it. And then there was one child that was said to be immune, and it was suggested that she was born immune to the toxin.
That has basis in the real world.
Absolutely. So Triffids. There's more specific details here and there. There are some more varieties, but in general, that's the monster. This is one of the first times we have like a detailed stat sheet.
We got the stat block for the monster.
Yeah, like we had like the novel and various movies and stuff. The novel was very detailed about what a Triffid is. So we have a lot of info of what the author thought these creatures should be like.
So once again, it seems one of our prime challenges in evolving this particular plant monster is getting a plant that moves a lot.
And this one is
this one walks, it sways, it clatters.
We can't really avoid the movement. It has to move if it's a Triffid.
Is this, and this is a question for Aly, is our naturally evolved Triffid Old Man Wyndham in a Triffid costume?
I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling kids.
Just pull the funnel off.
Yeah. I almost want to say yes, just to like, and that's it. We're done.
Yeah, we did it.
Well, now we have to
It
come
was
up
just
with
a guy.
what his plot was,
Why
how
did he do
pulled it
it?
off, how did he blind everyone? Were the meteors just a projector onto onto a fog machine?
No, I want to build a plant.
So how do we get a plant to move? I do have some thoughts.
Magic warning.
Oh, yes,
yeah, we
yeah.
should put the magic.
This is
disclaimer.
definitely a good time for now. At no point is any magic described in these stories. These are pure sci-fi.
Right. This isn't like mandrakes and talking trees. Like it's meant to be
Yeah,
scientific.
these are categorized under science fiction, but
Mhm.
yeah, they are still fantastical. They are still unrealistic. There's a reason we don't have Triffids running around today. So we will get as close as we can, but there are going to be some limitations. The prehensile trunk vine plucking food, probably not going to happen.
No.
Right.
Probably
I'm
not going to get
opposed.
to that.
Bit of a stretch.
Literally.
So I have a thought about moving plants.
Okay, I'm here for it. I'm so down.
I'm gonna throw this out there because we've talked about the way that Triffids move is just moving their roots, and we've talked that there are plants that move. Here's a thought that I had. I'm gonna throw it out there. Take it. Deal with it. What do you think of a vine that grows quickly on which the Triffid is an outgrowth? So as the vine stretches across its environment, it's dragging along this large structure that is not itself actually moving. It's just being moved as the vine grows.
Yeah.
That was the one thought I had of like, how could I get a plant to actually move in a noticeable motion?
My first thought is that probably wouldn't be a vine. It would be a stolon, which is like a ground branch.
Sure.
I don't know. See, my problem is still the roots.
Right.
Mhm.
The roots of the elephant in the room.
It does need to be rooted.
Yeah, it either needs to be rooted or not rooted. Like,
and Triffids can root down if they want to, but whenever they're moving, they are completely unrooted.
right.
They could walk across pavement
Right.
and be fine.
If, again, we don't have to go with this, but just following the logical progression, if the stolen is rooting along the way, you could have it moving this Triffid body along.
But it wouldn't
Mhm.
be. I'm sorry, I'm not on board with this. Just
That's
because
okay.
I don't think it would and it wouldn't pull. It would just this is where I'm going.
Yeah, because it grows from the front.
Yeah. No, when I'm so hung up on and have been from the moment y'all said Triffid, are the walking palms.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like we would have to, like, obviously we'd have to do adjustments because of the pace.
Yep.
Not fast enough. But also, side note, I have been holding on to this fact since the beginning. So, you mentioned that Triffids were, like, big business because of the oil, and that it was an industrial oil. Well, there's a plant that fills that role today. There is a plant that filled the role of whale oil when we stopped hunting whales, and that's jojoba.
Oh, cool.
Huh.
So, like, that's totally based in fact.
Cool.
So, yes.
So we got that part.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. Like, that's true. That's real. Like, we did that.
Nice.
Yeah, so I was thinking of two different things, though. So, like, the walking palm, yes. But also, like, there are plants with really weak root systems. Like, that's not where... Like, they're not getting their nutrients from rooty roots, but more like aerially roots. But that's, like... So maybe you could do something with that? I don't know.
You mentioned this when we talked about the people-eating plants of tumbleweeds.
Yes.
Or maybe you mentioned that in walking trees. But you mentioned that for a way of mobility. Thinking about weak roots, and this isn't technically walking, but I got the image of a Triffid that is rooted, but, like, just real shallow, barely, like, you don't have to dig more than an inch down to find the bottom of the plant, sort of thing. And its roots are just these real thin hair roots, nothing robust, so that it could very easily either wither those roots or detach them and just be able to fall over and move, be rolled or be blown or roll downhill, and then re-root and slowly grow back upright. Because then that has kind of the inactive states of the plant.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I do have another thought.
I'm ready.
Could you have a plant that carries around soil with it? So a Triffid, the base of the Triffid is this bulbous shape.
Yeah.
Could you have it such that so that the true roots face inward, and it just collects soil inside there that it replenishes every now and then? Like, could you have a plant that is carrying around somehow its soil that would require it to otherwise be rooted in the ground?
Yeah.
I don't even know how that would work. My first thought is, but it would rain, and then all its soil would get washed away.
It could be in a little... could you have a plant that lives in its own pot and can move itself around with this pot?
Like Smash Brothers Piranha Plant.
Yes. Also, Audrey 2
yes.
in the brief sequence in the 86 movie where it moves.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, I don't have a... I'm leaning towards no. Again, I keep just shooting down everything for you this time, David. Like, no.
That's true.
Not on board with that one either.
I have one more suggestion.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Before we start. Because with the walking trees, we did eventually come to, like, yeah, okay, they are kind of moving.
Yeah.
But you're not going to see it happen. But you could, like, I love the thought of waking up in the morning and there are Triffids at the door.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, you might not actually see them run after you, but they can move toward their stuff.
Right. We could also bring in the idea of a symbiotic relationship again.
Okay. This is true.
Is there some sort of animal that is carrying the plant around? Can we invoke fungi somehow to take advantage of their A, rapid growth, and B, ability to enhance the effectiveness of roots to allow a plant to put down roots very quickly?
Ooh. I really like the idea of, like, mycorrhizal, like, situation. Yeah, because I think that what we need is speedy movement and, like, resilient roots. That, like, you basically that can handle being periodically uprooted.
Right.
I'm still really hung up on the palm idea, because even if you think about, like, not walking palms, but, like, palmy palms, their root ball is itty bitty.
Yep.
Their root ball is not very big, but they're propped up very often by these kind of, like, stilt roots that are much more robust. So, like, this does feel like a stretch, but I really don't care, because that's the whole point of this. Like, yeah, if you can kind of have this exaggerated, accelerated root formation, like, yes, I am now on top of a dead body and I would like to suck up all the nutrients. Okay, thanks, bye. Like, I don't know, like, how do you make a plant move?
Well, like, because the way plants move, like fly trap movement and stuff like that, it's typically hydraulic pressure, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, we have a physical way to cause motion. It's just now, and it never says the walking is lifting. It's just dragging.
Yes.
The feet. It doesn't sound like the feet typically are going. You wouldn't find Triffid footprints. You would find a drag mark as they just scrunch forward with the 3 limbs.
If we're using fly trap style movement as a inspiration, it could be that the movement happens in quick bursts.
Yeah.
That it could be that, like, as an idea, maybe you grow roots out in a direction and then there's a rapid contraction that kind of drags the body of the plant forward a little bit.
Which is how they described when it drags the third foot, it described it as a lurch.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That it lurches forward to bring it up with the other 2.
Yeah.
Now, you'd then have to grow roots forward again, get them in plant. So it would still be very slow, but it could be motion in, like, bursts.
Yeah. And also, I feel like that, like, shambling motion works really well with the whole, like, zombie association.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it gets that sway of the stem if it's a quick motion.
Yeah, so it's like, it's not going to be human walking speed. But you could have it to where across a day you could watch a Triffid jerk 2 or 3 or 4 times as it is making its way somewhere.
And you could see it move.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be like you wake up the next morning and it's in a different place. It's like, no, I saw that plant shift a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if they're not huge, when you mentioned 7, you were like, they are 7 feet tall. And my first reaction was, wow, that's big. And then my second reaction was, no, it's a plant.
Yeah.
I did the same thing. It's bigger than a human, but that's actually small for a plant.
That's not that big, actually.
And if they're not, like, heavy, woody.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If they're more herbaceous, then that
more
could
of a banana tree than a tree.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of the reason why I'm leaning more towards palm than, like, tree, because then you have this combination of, like, the shallow root ball, these kind of aerial stilt roots, and they're much more flexible, and that's kind of what you were talking about with, like, the waving trunk, and so I feel like that kind of all pulls that together.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I like about palm, and you can correct me if my image in my head is wrong.
Okay.
But I often think about palms as having those sort of plate-like or shingle-like bark.
Yeah.
Which could easily clatter when they
move.
move.
Ooh, yeah.
If it's kind of loose for whatever reason.
You get kind of a rattlesnake thing going.
You get kind of a rattle in that loose bark towards the base. That could sort of be our version of the Clatter Sticks.
I like that.
And it could still function as it could still have a function, but it's not that they are intentionally moving it. Although they could, again, they could be if we're going with the sort of rapid movement.
Well, and I like that as well, because if we are going with that, it's moving these little bursts, but then it would have to grow the 2 roots forward again before it can do that.
Mm-hmm.
It means that, like, in an area with Triffids, they wouldn't be chasing you. You wouldn't see them rushing at you from the forest, but you would just hear, like,
yes.
As they move just periodically.
One at a time every now and then.
So the other thing, too, in the story, if you remove the Clatter Sticks, it kills the plant.
Yeah.
Right.
And the reason I think that your explanation works really well with that is that I don't know if this is true of palms, but it is true of trees, that if you girdle it, so you remove the bark in a strip all the way around, you will kill it.
Right, because you're cutting off the vascular system.
Exactly, you're cutting off its circulation. So that's kind of the same thing. If you remove one of those strips, like that might, I don't 100% know, I don't work with monocots, but like that feels like it's probably a similar sort of thing that like, ooh, you could do some damage if you like, take bits off of it.
Yeah.
Maybe you'd have to, you couldn't just break it in half, but like if you pull it out by the root, you're actually yanking out parts of the bark where the vascular system might be.
Which is fitting, because there was one description, I don't think it was in the main book, that you can mangle, you can damage the Clatter Sticks without killing it, and that'll affect their, I think, reproductive cycle, if I remember right. But you can't destroy them, you can't remove them, because then they will die.
All right. Okay. I like this sort of rapid contraction of the roots every now and then to kind of drag the plant along.
Well, because then it means that, like, it may not rush up to your doorstep, but, like, if there's a trail you take every so often, there could suddenly be a Triffid next week along the trail or something, or you know, where you're not able to observe them regularly from your porch. They could move into locations throughout the forest or throughout your land over the weeks and months.
And we did in the trees episode, not the Spook-E trees episode, talk about the ways plants might sense their environment to then move in a direction. And we had talked about them following sound or following gravity. In this case, the idea that comes most prominently to mind is chemical cues.
Yes.
If you're being attracted to, like, corpses, that's something that you can pick up from the air, which plants can already do, right? They have chemical communication.
Yeah.
And you could easily see how a plant might get confused by the smells of a populated area, especially if there's lots of food or like a graveyard or something.
Well, and if it's, you know, if it's looking for corpses to grow next to and take the nutrients from, and so it's following the scents, it would also make sense if you react to the scent of just, you know, where animals tend to frequent, you know, and that could be either in the air, but that could also be along the ground, you know, following the scent trails, the chemicals with those roots, and changing direction as you need to.
And that way it's not that you're just going towards where a corpse is, because that would take you forever, but that you are heading towards what senses like populated areas where animals are, so that you are there when a corpse shows up.
So you have to move less far.
It's a concentration gradient.
Yes.
Yes.
Like, they're just finding the highest concentration. That's all. That's what plants do.
And I like the thought that, because they're rooted most of the time anyway.
Yeah.
So maybe finding a nice corpse is just a benefit for reproductive purposes or something like that.
Oh, yes. Because very often when you're, like, fruiting, like, yes, I'm going to put as much of my energy into this as I possibly can. So, like, hey, if you're going to give me, like, bonus dead people nutrients, like, yes, I will put those into my seeds.
Yeah. Well, and isn't it true, again, I'm going to say some plant knowledge that you can weigh in on, that there are many plants where it is the case that you will reproduce asexually until the situation is right, that you can then reproduce sexually.
Yeah, so I have heard it described that plants are not obligate sexual reproducers, but facultative sexual reproducers. So they don't have to reproduce sexually. They can just, you know, vegetative, this is my son, he is my clone.
Right. He is my leg.
He is my leg. But if you have everything that you need, then yes, you can, you know, actually put that effort in. Because, like, for example, like a cactus. Cacti are just going to, like, sprout little bits off of them all day. I've had a cactus for more than 10 years, and it's honking huge, and it has never not once flowered.
Yeah.
Like, which makes, and it's not going to be pollinated when it is.
Right. So yeah, it could be that once you find a nice corpse to settle down on, now you can, you know, put in the effort for fruiting and such.
I'm sorry, I just like that. Find a nice corpse, settle down.
Yeah.
Well, it's when things are stable, you know, you can start thinking about kids.
So it sounds like the big thing that remains is the other elephant in the room.
Yep.
Yes.
Which is the Venomous Stinger.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I got thoughts.
All right.
So, I am actually much more on board with the puff than with the sting.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. That was easy.
Yeah.
That took zero selling.
Well, I mean, we can still, if we want,
If we can get a sting, that would be awesome.
That'd be awesome. And
that would be more true to most versions of them.
Yes.
Right.
But yeah, the puff is much more plant.
Yes.
That feels much
planty.
more. Yeah, that's much more planty. Even if we wanted to do a symbiosis with a fungus, like so that it was like a puffing mushroom head that grew with the plant, that would also be very, very easy to conceive.
My first thought was, what if there is like a large cone snail like creature that lives in the head, and like our other symbiosis examples is there to protect the plant with its stingy lash. Again, symbiotic relationship, something's protecting it. Although I did just have the other thought, what if there is a vine, and maybe it doesn't even roll up, maybe it's just perpetually hanging out of the top, and when it lurches forward, the vine swings around and is a momentary defense for the brief moment where the plant is vulnerable during motion.
That actually gives me an idea. Along those lines of the vine being just out there flaccid, that it could maybe be something to where it kind of like our funeral flower, it doesn't react until it is engaged. And I'm kind of picturing the barnacles from Half-Life and Trouble in Terrorist Town. That it could be hanging there. It's supposed to be sticky, that's canon. And it could even have maybe small Velcro-like barbules or something. But like if you're walking the forest and not paying attention and get hit by it, then it responds and tries to pull or tries to or
like a sundew, it'll wrap,
or something, or it will, maybe that's when it then, the chemical reaction is triggered to go, all right, all these little barbs, envenomate or something, and it's more like fly paper, like the fly tape that you hang up,
right?
Than it is a bullwhip.
That makes me have another thought. What if that vine that hangs out there is sticky and its job is to catch pollen out of the air, and when it has caught enough of it, it rapidly retracts?
Yes.
But the retraction could also be triggered by the pressure of someone touching it, and the rapid retraction has the effect of, like
scraping
or sort of whipping kind of on its way up.
The rapid retraction also makes sense if that's also a way for it to catch extra insects.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
so it could bring in pollen and insects into
food.
And that the sticky stuff is not necessarily meant to be toxic, but if it gets in our bloodstream, it could be one of those situations where it's bad for people, even if that's not the purpose of it.
Or if it scrapes you on the way up, now you have a cut and it's infected.
And this stuff is real gross. Yeah. And this stuff is nasty.
It's full of dead insects.
Yeah, exactly. This is not going to be good to get into a wound, and so people become septic very quickly or something.
I'm really enjoying this, particularly because it has an explanation for pollination.
Right?
Right, see? We did it.
I'm so happy about that.
Now, if that's the case, it would actually make a lot more sense for it to have a number of vines.
Yeah.
Like 3 or 4 of them draped down the sides.
Might be that you have a couple of them that are for pollen collection and a puffy one that is just a weapon.
You could have that. It could have multiple, but it could be something to where once it's retracted, it takes it a while to get back out. So usually only 1 or 2 are out.
Right.
Yes.
And that it's cycling through them. But you're not usually going to see one with a bunch of them out. You're only going to see one out because the others have been retracted and are taking a while to be released.
You could even say that each one can only do it so many times, similar to a fly trap.
Yeah.
Where after a certain number of snaps, the leaves wither away.
Because you have this mechanical limit.
Yeah. Right. Because then it could be like shark teeth, where it's cycling through its angler vine to have one out, and it's growing the next ones to get ready for when that one wears out.
It's an angler fig.
Oh, man.
Dr. Aly Baumgartner, everybody.
I'm so proud of that.
That's amazing.
Fantastic.
And then we don't have to worry about copyright.
Yeah, exactly. That'll be the Spook-E-verse name.
There we go.
The anglerfish. That's awesome.
I'm so proud of myself, guys.
Oh, cool.
All right, that's a pretty cool idea. And if we want to add to it, it could also be thorny as a defense mechanism.
Oh, yeah.
So that it is, if you touch it, not only does it retract for protection, but it also maybe hurts you along the way.
Yeah.
Kind of the way that I'm thinking about that is that if you have kind of like the prickles, say a rose, those are directional.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to...
They're retractable? Or they're recurved, I mean?
Yeah, you have it
recurved.
upward.
That's what I mean, yeah.
You were thinking cat claws.
I was.
You're
No,
like,
recurved
yes.
like snake teeth.
Yes.
And also cat claws.
And also cat claws. Yeah, so maybe it's a kind of the side effect of like when it retracts, it kind of just scrapes across you. Completely unrelated, because maybe that, who knows, because maybe that'll help, maybe that kind of like helps funnel the pollen where it needs to go so it can be pushed in.
That it could also be just a thing of like, hey, every herbivore around me, don't chew on this part.
Yes.
Please don't chew on my angler vine. I really would appreciate it if you didn't. So I'm going to cover it in spikes.
And
make
sap and grossness.
Yes.
Don't chew on... This is kind of important.
Yeah, because the spikes aren't going to bother the bugs and the pollen that are going to land on there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like that. Man, that's just like a hooked whip. That's terrifying.
I'm so into it. Yeah, I'm just relieved that we figured out how it pollinates, or how it's pollinated, because I was really genuinely upset about that.
Well, I mean, I think the obvious canon explanation in the book is that they kiss.
Right. Yeah.
The Triffids just run up to each other and funnel to funnel.
Okay, that made my brain go, cloacal kiss.
Yeah, just like that.
Just like that.
You know what else I like about that?
Huh.
It adds not the cloacal kissing, but the angler.
I'm checked out now.
The angler vine. What I like about that is that it adds an extra reason why these plants would be attracted to decaying remains. Mm-hmm. Not only is that a potential source of nutrient for your roots, but also there will be bugs hanging out there.
Yum flies.
So it's a smorgasbord. Above and below, there are nutrients to be had.
Oh, yes.
I like that.
I'm very happy with that.
That's pretty cool. It's not quite a lash.
No.
It's
not aiming.
It's not aiming at the face or anything.
And that was going to be one of the biggest things we like, making a cognitive plant.
Right.
That was going to be real tricky to figure out a way around.
Probably would have required some sort of an animal lives in the head.
we would have to add a brain.
Right. There's just a really mean frog that lives in the head of the plant that has a cone snail tongue that just wards things away from the plant.
Well, yeah. And it's one of those things, right, where I was trying so hard, because it's like, okay, like, what can plants perceive? It's like, okay, like waves, okay, concentration gradients, okay. Mm-hmm. Man, that's a stretch.
Yeah, right.
How far can you take those things?
It's hard to get it aiming for the eyes.
And I mean,
I'd be tempted to go with insects again, because they could do it. It's just a chain of bees. There's not actually a vine. It's like the ants in the jungle that make. It's just a chain of ants.
It's just bees on threads.
It's like Nerd's rope, but it's bees.
It makes me think of coming too close. Like, what's this thing? Looking down and getting whipped in the face. Like,
right.
No, it didn't mean to hurt you.
Well, and it could very easily be a situation of like, well, most of the time it attacks exposed skin. So, well, it's hitting people on the hand and arm when they reach for the plant. Like that's why it's doing that.
It could be that. It could also be like, in addition to that it's like, oh yeah, every time you get stung, it's on exposed skins. Well, yeah, because it didn't sting you through your shirt.
Right, exactly. It's the survivorship bias.
Exactly. It's like, exactly. Every plane that comes back is only shot up in the wings
Yeah.
And it's not, none of them are shot in the cockpit. Isn't that weird? Well, no.
Yeah, those didn't come back.
Those are the ones that came back. The others didn't. Yeah.
If it scraped your shirt, then yeah, you didn't have to go to the... Well, it's
you probably didn't even notice.
Yeah.
So it could be, just because of the way it happens, a seemingly logical story.
But yeah, it reminds me kind of this thing where humans, being animals, really like to assign like intention to things, including plants.
Yeah, we will anthropomorphize anything.
Anything. And a Triffid being like, I would tripedal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like it is upright. It is moving. It sort of has limbs. It has kind of like a face. Like because it seems to move with intention, it is so easy to therefore assign it intention. So like if you have these things that are just doing their own plant business, like I'm just trying to pollinate, yo, and like, you get whipped as a side effect, it's so easy to be like, yeah, it was coming for my house and then it whipped me in the face. It's like, well, no, you I don't know, there's a bunch of dead, like, there's a bunch of dead things out over there. I don't know, you got a compost pile. Pile. And, and then you got too touchy-feely with the plant.
I like the thought that one guy one time got whipped in the face, and now that's what is known about Triffids.
Yes.
We need to get rid of these things. They're a scourge.
It's like the urethra fish.
Oh, the candiru.
The candiru, where there's one possibly apocryphal story about where one ended up, and now that is the thing that everyone thinks they know to be true about this type of fish. Yeah, one guy, Bob, got slashed in the face by this plant one time.
Yep.
Well, and I also like, because we also have the mythos that would set up very well for if it's a plant that is known of like, hey, don't get scratched by that because you're probably gonna have to go to the healer or the hospital,
right?
Because you're gonna get sick and might die. Like that thing is potentially fatal, and then we keep finding them around bodies.
Yeah.
Like we keep finding them growing beside, where they were definitely not. Like this was definitely not here last week. And then Old Man Jenkins got drunk and finally passed out in the woods,
right.
And we found Triffids around his body.
Yeah, getting slowly closer.
Yeah, he must have gotten taken by the Triffids.
Okay, so I love that. And the whole time that you were talking, I was thinking about like the way the presence of Triffids would influence funerary practices.
Oh yeah.
Because think about it, if you bury a body, a Triffid is going to mosey on over there and like, these are my nutrients things.
Yep.
Like, I like just kind of the mythos associated with that, with like,
Well, and in that mentality, what you mentioned about like a compost heap, that would go very well along with like, oh yeah, they like to wait around houses.
Yeah.
They like to wait around,
especially
where you're
if
living,
in like a farming village.
Oh yeah. They're going to gather around, so be careful because they will wait for you. Change up your patterns.
Well, and the thought of someone walking out their door in the morning and then getting whipped by a Triffid because they didn't notice that it is now standing there.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I really like the journey that we took with this.
So this is a palm.
Yeah.
Going off. And the other thing I was going to mention is our Triffid, as trees/tree-like things go, is relatively small, if we're keeping it 7 feet tall, and relatively leafless.
Yes.
Which I would imagine makes some sense if you're getting a lot of your nutrients through carnivory and scavenging.
Yep.
You can get away with not having to rely so heavily on other sources of energy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's kind of, in that respect, it's very much like a parasitic plant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like ghost pipe and things like that. They don't have to be photosynthetic because, like, they're getting all of those sugars, those nutrients from another source.
Yeah, I don't need the sun.
Yeah.
I got some backup, but like
I just need you.
Yeah.
So we have a palm with not necessarily ephemeral roots, but rapidly adjusting roots that have that hydraulic constriction system that allows it to drag itself.
Yes.
Clattery loose bark around the bottom, which maybe is a defense mechanism. I'm moving here.
Well, and I can see that being one of those things like you're mobile. You're going to bump into stuff. You're going to rub up against stuff. Yeah. It could be armor for, you know,
that's true.
I can't see what's in front of me because I'm a plant.
Right.
So when I shift, and if there's a branch that's about to clothesline me, I need to not get snapped.
Oh, I like that.
So maybe that's why it's armored.
And then up at the top, we have a flower, a true flower or flower-like structure.
It could be a flower. It's an angiosperm.
Okay. Yeah. It's a monocot you mentioned, which I think makes it our first monocot. Of our monster plants. I was wondering if we were going to end up with like a moss or a fern at some point, but a palm's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I realized that there was probably no way that I was going to do something that wasn't an angiosperm because I am so angiosperm centric. But hey, the fact we got a monocot, like that's close.
Yeah.
Like
next time, conifers.
Yeah, I was about to say all the conifer people can now get mad at you, like all of the plant people get mad at us for the animal stuff.
Exactly.
I mean, listen, basically all of our spooky creations have been vertebrates.
Oh yeah,
sorry,
that's
guys.
true.
And this flower is there to receive reproductive stuff and food, like a flower. Yeah. And it's got its vine that is covered in thorns and sticky stuff to collect pollen and bugs, and as a secondary defense mechanism for if something bumps against it, and then it drags itself towards corpses and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's the angler fig.
I also like the vine collecting the pollen because that, I forgot to mention this when we first came up with it, but that connects nicely with the 95% infertility that like... Yeah, it's passively collecting just whatever comes by. Mm-hmm. If there's not a real dense population of Triffids, it might take it a while to actually get fertilized. Mm-hmm. Because it's not... They can't aim at each other and there's not anyone moving it, so it's just... If you happen to collect pollen, if the next one though is like miles away, you might go a while before you finally can reproduce.
Also, it's also fair to point out that it could also collect pollen from the bugs.
Yes,
that it's trapping. True. Like if one of them landed on a Triffid and got away.
Yeah. If there's the Triffid fly that is able to get in there.
Yes.
And not get stuck or something.
Oh, because of course there would.
Oh yeah.
Every one of the plants we have created would have insects, of course.
Oh yeah.
In its natural environment. That there would definitely be a insect or a spider or something that is adapted to crawling up and down the vine,
and getting
just picking the bugs off of it.
Yes.
Yep. So, listeners, we're not going to come up with the entire insect,
the whole ecosystem that
surrounds these plants. But if you want to come up with all the insects that'd be adapted,
yes, please.
There is a, I forget what it's called, but there is a larva of a fly, I think, that lives on sundews.
Ooh.
And I think secretes a solution that prevents it from getting trapped.
Cool.
Teflon.
But it doesn't get stuck on the sundew, but it's able to crawl around and eat the other bugs that get stuck.
Oh, that's so good. I mean, yeah, it's like the things that live in pitcher plants.
It's a larval kleptoparasite.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, I'm here for that.
So yeah, the angler fig would absolutely have angler fig flies.
Yes. Oh, I'm so into it. Also, I was thinking about this as you were explaining. In terms of like what reproductive, like what part of the flower it is, I kind of, because you said there were stamens, like you did mention specifically the part.
That's what it was described as on the Triffid info site. Yeah,
so I almost think about like it's like they could be like these vine structures could also just be like modified petals that are just like ancillary, because plants love to modify bits of the flower. Like, sorry, fun fact, flowering dogwood, the part of the flower that you think is a petal is not. It's a bract. It's not part of the flower at all.
Neat.
Yeah.
I like our Triffid.
I like it. I like the angular fig.
I also like that we came up with by we, I mean me. I came up with a name.
You can be proud of yourself.
Yeah, no, I like angler fig.
Angler fig is so good.
I know.
That's a very good name.
I'm so proud of it.
TM. That's right. You can't take no copyright right now.
Yeah. Don't send your lawyers to us, Wyndham.
No one can do it.
I like it a lot.
I think we did it, y'all.
And with that, we can start wrapping up Spook-E for this year. as usual, if you have any thoughts about Triffids and how they could exist in our real world, or if you want to draw the anglerfig, we would be so happy to see it and share it, so let us know. This is going to wrap up this year's Spook-E.
This is it, the end of Monster Plants.
Yeah.
We had the funeral flower, our Venus skytrap.
Yep.
Oh, that's so good.
People eating plant. We have our wailing willows.
Yep.
Our walking, talking trees, kind of. We had our mandrakes.
Yep.
Yes.
And now we have our Triffids, our version of Triffids, our anglerfig. That's a pretty good spooky lineup for a year.
I like it. Now we can have a spooky garden.
Yes, yes.
Again.
I also just like the idea of multiple plants walking, but like just chilling around in the spooky verse. Like that makes me so happy.
Yeah. Well, it's to fun to think about which of our other spooky verse creations would live on our wailing willow.
Exactly. Like who's gonna overlap?
Would our shrew vampire crawl around among the branches?
Mm-hmm.
Would our angler figs be drawn to our funeral flowers?
Right.
Ooh.
Like moving towards them?
That's true.
Oh, well,
would the funeral flower have to develop chemical defenses to ward away angler figs from getting in there and stealing its nutrients?
Our harpies could be the ones chucking the whistling fruits.
That's true. Well, because
a bunch of angsty primates.
I was gonna say primates chucking fruits.
Yeah.
That checks out.
On brand. We do that.
We had a whole conversation about which fruit was best to chuck.
That's right. Well, a big thanks to everyone for listening to Spook-E. A big thanks. I think that, we haven't done this in the past, but since there's 3 of us, it feels more apropos to say big thanks to Will for looking up all these.
Yes!
As I have often said, Spook-E is the easiest thing for me that we do. Because the only preparation I have to come up with is what funny thing am I going to do at the very beginning.
Yep.
And that's it. And all the rest of it is just Will putting in work. And Aly, you had to do even less. You just had to know about plants.
I had one line.
Yep.
Yeah, no, this is great, because normally when I'm on here, I do all sorts of prep work and, make sure that I know what I'm talking about, and today it was like, I get to talk about plants, and that was it.
Yeah. Yep. So it's relaxed, it's fun. So thanks, Will, for making Spook-E happen.
Thanks, Will. It's wonderful.
It is my pleasure. I love this show, and I love getting to learn about monsters.
And, of course, huge thanks to Aly for being our first ever Spook-E guest.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, this was so much fun. I am so glad. So, hold on. Let me tell you how the sausage is made. They've been asking me for a very long time, and we're so, David gets all of the credit in the world because he has been slowly reminding me for months, hey, we want to do this thing in October. You started asking me in January.
I started asking you last year.
Yeah,
that's true.
Actually,
last
because we had considered doing this.
Yes.
So, again, a little bit more behind the scenes, and then we got to wrap up.
Yeah.
We were ready to do this last year.
Yep.
Yeah.
But Aly, you were unavailable.
Yeah.
So we did Sea Monsters instead, and we were like, all right, once Aly's available, plants.
Yeah, so last year you're like, okay, next year we would like you to do this. And then starting in January, okay, I'm going to ask you later this year if you'd like to do this. And then a few months later you're like, okay, but really, do you want to do this? So I appreciate, kudos to Will for doing all of the background, but kudos to David for wrangling me.
Yeah, for getting our guest.
Yes.
I hung out that angler vine.
Yes.
Threw her in.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone. We love doing this one so much. Let us know what your thoughts are, and we will see you next year for another round of Spook-E.
Yeah, do a Triffid impression. Thanks for listening to the Common Descent podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and check our WordPress blog for pictures and links after each episode. Huge thanks to our patrons whose support helps keep this podcast running and who get access to bonus goodies on Patreon. The song you're hearing is called On the Origin of Species by Protodome, which we found at ocremix.org. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.